Hello, and welcome to the coolest blanket fort I have ever made. So if you've been watching our social media accounts, you got to see the construction of the blanket fort, but I'm going to give you a real quick tour. So we have the biggest blanket that the Westbrooks own behind me. Then we've got more blankets, some pillows, my iPad for reading, more blankets. And we are back. So I have been spending all week recording my audiobook for my upcoming book, Trauma Bonded, a true story of navigating relationships forged. A true story of navigating attachments forged in complex PTSD. And really excited about that. We've got a lot of great things coming. So thank you for joining us today for our Throwback Thursday. Welcome. Today, we are going to do a foundational review on radical acceptance. And I was supposed to do this last week and got really, really sick on last Thursday, did not feel well at all. So we ended up postponing it to today. And I'm again in the recording studio. So I am super casual in my t-shirt I bought from Carnival Cruise Line when I cruised to Grand Turk. So welcome to Sarah's Casual Throwback Thursday. When I begin to teach clients about radical acceptance, one of the things I most commonly hear is almost this defeatist kind of feeling like, so I just have to accept this. There's nothing I can do about it. So I just have to let these things happen to me. I hear those types of statements quite a bit. And so I spend a great deal of, excuse me, I swallowed my spit. I've been talking all morning, reading books all morning, a book all morning. So I generally have to teach my clients that no, that's not what radical acceptance is at all. If there's any attitude of being like, oh, I'm just giving up and accepting, then we're not really utilizing radical acceptance therapeutically. And so the first meme that I prepared today, and I pulled both of these quotes off of the psychcentral.com website because they explain it really well. And radical acceptance is a coping mechanism that I utilize regularly when I'm working through what's called dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT, which is one of my favorite modalities to use when I am counseling. But what they say over at Psych Central, and really kind of that let's lead into what is radical acceptance, is the understanding that, and I'm going to quote here, resisting reality leads to an internal struggle. Accepting difficult situations can lead you away from pain and into peace. One of the things that I teach my clients is that radical acceptance is a lot like the serenity prayer, in the sense of that one line that says, help me accept the things I cannot change. So radical acceptance is about identifying the things that we don't have control over, the things that I don't have the power to change because it's not in my wheelhouse. So for example, I have to radically accept that I have a child with schizophrenia. I have to radically accept that his schizophrenia impairs his ability to communicate with me the way that my other children are able to communicate with me. Radical acceptance is recognizing when somebody doesn't have the skill set needed to respond to you differently, and identifying they don't have the skill set, they aren't open to learning this new skill set from me, and then making decisions based on that. So with radical acceptance, there's a great deal of conscious effort that you make to be in a reality-placed brain space. And the way that we do that is we've got to examine the data around us without judgment. So the way that this has looked in my own life, and I'm going to use the example of relationship with my father, is that when I got married, I was still in that developmental brain space that I felt like I needed to please my father in order to earn his love. When I began to identify that my father's abuse, that what I defined as abuse. He defined it as appropriate grandfatherly discipline. But when I identified that the things that I felt that he did to me that were abusive, when he started to do that to my children, my number one goal was keep my children safe. And then number two was try and coach my dad on how to do it differently in a way that didn't harm our relationship. And I failed over and over and over again because I felt like my father should honor the way that I wanted my children disciplined when they were having negative behaviors or honestly just normal kid shit that they like to do. Um, and it took me quite some time to get to the point where I had to accept the fact that my father would never respect my opinion regarding children. And a lot of that was because since he was an elementary school principal and an elementary school teacher for his 32-year career in elementary academia, that he felt like he always knew better than me. I also had to gather up the data and identify my dad doesn't do well when his opinions are challenged. My dad doesn't do well when he is told that he's doing something wrong. And so anytime that I would approach my dad with, hey, I don't feel like you handled that well. And hey, by the way, this is how I want you to do discipline. He either couldn't or wouldn't view anything differently. His response was, I know what I'm doing. Look at all these kids I've done. I've done this more than you. You kids growing up were way more well behaved than your kids, Sarah, are today. Therefore, my techniques are better than yours. And because of that attitude that he had, I had to get to a place where I recognized reality was he wasn't willing to respect me. He wasn't willing to do things differently. He wasn't willing to change. Radical acceptance is about accepting that reality and leaning into the emotions. And that means that I'm allowed to be sad, angry, frustrated. I'm allowed to grieve. I'm allowed to mistrust my dad. I'm allowed to discontinue contact to keep my kids safe. I'm allowed to lean in, feel my feels, and then realign my boundaries so that I respond differently to the reality that I am living in. So, again, with this quote that we've got here, resisting reality leads to an internal struggle. For me, I spent years with the internal struggle of trying to be good enough for my father. I wanted my children to behave in a manner that he would say, Sarah's a great parent. It's not what I got. I had no control over my dad's viewpoints of me. Even if I did things perfect, it never was good enough for him. And so I had to get to that place. Again, accepting difficult situations can lead you away from pain and into peace. And what I can say is, as I put up those boundaries and I put that separation between my father and my children, I experience a great deal more peace because I'm not trying to be this mediator go-between to support a relationship that I believe is unhealthy. So I hope that that piece makes sense. On our next slide, I want to kind of define from Psych Central. They define the question, or they answer the question, what is radical acceptance? And this is really kind of what we've been talking about. Radical acceptance means practicing conscious effort to acknowledge and honor difficult situations and emotions, fully accepting things as they are instead of ignoring, avoiding, or wishing the situation were different can be a critical step in moving through a difficult experience to experiencing more meaning. One of the things that happens when we're always wishing things away or we're having a difficult time accepting the reality that we're in is we get stuck in a place and we feel like we can't behave differently. We feel like we can't make a different choice because the whole world will come crashing down. And that nervousness, that anxiety about the anticipation, there's the word I'm looking for, anticipation of shifting your boundaries or responding differently usually dissipates shortly after a person is able to accept things as they are. So that is my quick lesson and review on radical acceptance. Do we have any questions today? Alrighty, I've got, can you walk through, can you walk through some of the phrases or words that are helpful in making emotional boundaries with people who you need to communicate with this level of acceptance for your own behaviors or theirs? So honestly, I'm going to start with saying you've got to collect the data to determine if the person that you're talking to is open to hearing what you want to say. For myself, with my father, I said something along the lines of, I'm not observing the type of change in you that makes me feel like my children are safe. Therefore, you're not allowed to see them without supervision. And then eventually it came down to, this is just turning toxic. You're not allowed to see them anymore. The words are going to change based on the situation that's going on. So I always recommend and would reinforce what we call a gentle startup, which is talking about yourself. Think of your gentle startup as being a little bit narcissistic, in the sense of, what I'm going to say is, so with the situation with my dad, I feel uncertain, or I feel distrust because I have not observed a significant difference that leads me to believe my children are not safe. Therefore, I am setting a new boundary. So if you notice that, what I've done is I start with the feeling word, and then I keep the sentences focused on me, rather than, I don't trust you because you did A, B, and C. You're not allowed to see my kids anymore. While that might be true, that might be, those you statements may be, accurate statements. You might be objectively restating what was said to you. It's not helpful, because then that person is going to hear that as, you're blaming me. So it's really important for you to verbalize your radical acceptance as I statements, utilizing those emotions. So I hope that answers your questions. If you have any more, please feel free to email me at daisygirlcommunications@gmail.com. Also, please feel free to visit our social media pages or our website. Our website is daisygirlcommunications.com. And then we are on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. I think we're on a couple more. I'll have to get back to you on that. And most of those you can find us either at Daisy Girl Communications, Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma, or Raising Crazy Growing Up to Show Up. Thanks so much. Can't wait to see you next week. Bye-bye.